The night before my final project submission, I sat in my room with my laptop glowing in the dark, every keystroke pounding like a heartbeat. Months of work, endless sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices had gone into this project. It was my last chance to prove that I wasn't the useless leech my family kept calling me. I could almost picture myself walking across that stage, diploma in hand, proving them wrong. That hope was the only thing that kept me alive in this toxic house. The door swung open without knocking like it always did, and there she was, my sister, Madison. Her perfectly styled hair, smug expression, and that cruel tilt of her lips told me trouble was about to rain. She strutted into my room, heels clicking against the wooden floor, as if she owned not just the house, but me too. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. "What's this?" she sneered, leaning over my desk and tapping the side of my laptop. "Another one of your pathetic little dreams? Do you really think anyone wants to see garbage trying to graduate?" I pushed her hand away, trying to stay calm, whispering, "Please, Madison, just leave it alone. This is my final project. If I don't turn this in tomorrow, everything's ruined." Her eyes sparkled with venom as she tilted her head and let out a mocking laugh. "Exactly! You don't deserve a graduation. You're nothing but a leech hanging off this family." Before I could react, she grabbed the laptop, raised it high above her head, and smashed it down on the floor. The sound of cracking plastic and shattering keys echoed in my chest like a gunshot. I screamed, diving down to gather the broken pieces, my breath catching in my throat as the screen went dark forever. My entire future blinked out in that single cruel moment. My parents stormed into the room after hearing the noise, and for a split second, I thought maybe they'd defend me. Maybe they'd stop Madison, punish her for what she had done. But instead, my father's face broke into a wicked grin. He leaned against the doorframe and chuckled. "Finally," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Now you can stop pretending like you have a future. Did you really think a parasite like you could graduate?" Mom folded her arms, smirking at my tears. "Your sister's right. Leeches don't graduate. People like you don't belong on stages, you belong in the shadows. Cry harder. Maybe your tears will make the floor shine at least." Madison's laughter filled the room as I clutched the broken laptop to my chest like a corpse. My chest ached, not just from losing the project, but from knowing that the people who should have protected me were laughing at my destruction. I begged, "Please, this was my only chance. Without this project, I'll fail. Don't you understand?" But Dad stepped closer, crouching until his face was just inches from mine. His voice was sharp, each word like a blade cutting into my skin. "Your future? It's a joke. You're a joke. And tomorrow, when your classmates walk that stage, you'll finally understand that you were never meant to rise." Mom clapped her hands mockingly, as if his cruelty was a performance worth celebrating. Madison gave me one final shove before leaving, her laughter still ringing down the hallway. Alone in that room, I sat on the floor surrounded by shattered plastic and glass, tears burning down my face. My hands shook as I touched the useless fragments, whispering to myself that it wasn't over, that somehow I'd find a way to make them regret every single word. The betrayal carved deep scars into my heart, but behind the pain, something else was starting to form, something sharper, something colder. It wasn't just about a broken laptop anymore. It was about the years of humiliation, the endless insults, the cruel games. And though they thought they had buried me that night, they didn't realize they had just planted the seed of their own downfall. I swore to myself I would rebuild, and when I rose again, their laughter would be the last thing they ever choked on. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, my back stiff and my face sticky with dried tears. The broken laptop lay scattered like bones across the carpet. Every time I blinked, I heard Madison's laughter, my father's words echoing, "Your future is a joke." My chest tightened, but instead of crying again, I stared at the ceiling and let the fury seep through my veins like fire. At school, my professors were stunned when I showed up empty-handed. My project was gone, my thesis wiped out in seconds. I didn't bother lying or making any excuses. I told them the truth. My sister smashed my laptop the night before my submission. Some of them looked shocked, others suspicious, but the result was the same. I failed. My classmates whispered as I walked past them, some smirking, some pitying me. Madison's words had traveled like wildfire, spreading her version of the story that I had procrastinated, failed, and blamed her to save face. And my parents? They fueled the fire, calling relatives to laugh about how our little Leech finally learned her place. For weeks, I spiraled in silence. While Madison flaunted her new clothes, while my parents bragged about her at family dinners, I was treated like dust under their shoes. They locked me out of conversations, mocked me when I tried to eat at the same table, and laughed whenever they caught me looking at colleges online. Mom sneered, "Don't even bother applying anywhere. No one gives scholarships to trash." Dad added, "You'll be lucky if someone hires you to mop floors." But here's the thing they never understood. Humiliation has a way of turning into fuel. Every insult, every shove, every time they laughed in my face, it hardened me. I started sneaking out to the library late at night, where the computers were old but functional. While they thought I was sulking in my room, I was typing through the night, rebuilding my project piece by piece from memory. I studied harder than I had ever studied in my life, using scraps of time, free access codes, and sheer determination. I refused to let them destroy me. When my parents realized I hadn't collapsed into nothingness like they hoped, they doubled down. Madison would wave her car keys in my face and whisper, "Maybe you can be my chauffeur someday." Mom told me at breakfast, "You should be grateful we even let you stay here. One more mistake and you're out." Dad slammed the table once, glaring at me. "You don't belong here. You're lucky your sister tolerates your existence." But I learned something during those months. The quieter I became, the more they underestimated me, and in that silence, I built something they couldn't see coming. I found a way to resubmit my project in a different program, one that allowed late entries for independent students. It wasn't easy. I had to beg for extensions, send long letters, and prove my worth. But when my work was finally accepted, it didn't just pass. It excelled. My design caught the eye of a small company that reached out with an offer to intern. For the first time, someone outside my family saw me as capable, valuable, worthy. And I told no one at home. I kept up the act, shoulders slouched, head down, silent at the dinner table, letting them think they had won. Madison still taunted me, Mom still laughed, Dad still called me a leech. But inside, I was smiling, because every step I took away from them, every piece of recognition I earned on my own, was one step closer to cutting off their control over me. Months later, when I signed the paperwork for my first real job, I walked into that office with shaking hands and a proud heart. I was moving into my own tiny apartment, barely big enough for one person, but it was mine. No more listening to them through thin walls, no more insults over dinner, no more laughter at my expense echoing in my ears. And still, I stayed silent. I didn't tell them where I moved. I didn't update them on my progress. I let them believe I was still crawling, still broken, still worthless. Because when my revenge came, it wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be devastating. By the time Madison's perfect life started to unravel, by the time the cracks began forming in my parents' little kingdom of favoritism, I was ready. They didn't know that their leech had quietly built a foundation stronger than anything they could tear down. And soon, they would choke on the truth. The night the tables finally turned was nothing like they could have imagined. By then, I had been living in my small apartment for months, working tirelessly at the company that had taken a chance on me. What started as an internship grew into a full-time position, and my project had caught the eye of investors who wanted to develop it further. Quietly, steadily, I was rising. My so-called worthless efforts were finally paying off, and the irony was almost too sweet. While my parents and Madison mocked me for being nothing, I was building everything. But fate has its way of forcing moments. It all came to a head when Madison's carefully polished life started cracking. Her grades slipped at her university, her reckless spending spiraled, and whispers started floating in our extended family that maybe, just maybe, She wasn't the shining star my parents had painted her to be. Of course, they brushed it off. Mom defended her. She's under pressure. She deserves a break. Dad laughed. Madison will land on her feet, unlike her sister. What they didn't know was that Madison had been caught plagiarizing in one of her final projects. Her name was dragged before the university's board, and instead of standing accountable, she panicked. She tried to shift the blame onto me, telling everyone in the family that I must have sabotaged her out of jealousy. She told my parents, "She always hated me. She probably hacked something. She's obsessed with revenge." And my parents? They believed her instantly. Dad called me, his voice sharp like a knife. "You're still the same snake you've always been. You'll ruin your sister because you can't stand her success." Mom hissed into the phone. "You'll never rise above trash. We'll make sure everyone knows you're nothing but poison." I didn't even defend myself. I didn't need to, because that was the night I decided their downfall wouldn't be whispered. It would be undeniable. Weeks later, my company hosted an event to showcase new talent. Investors, industry leaders, and media were invited. My work, the very same project Madison smashed along with my laptop months earlier, had been refined, perfected, and was now the centerpiece of the exhibition. The irony burned like fire in my chest. I sent invitations to my parents and Madison with a simple handwritten note, "Come see what failure looks like." They showed up, smug as ever, expecting me to embarrass myself. Madison even strutted in wearing a designer dress, whispering to my mother, "This will be fun." But when the lights dimmed and my presentation lit up the giant screen, the entire room fell silent. The project was introduced not by me, but by the CEO himself, who praised the brilliant mind behind the design. My name was announced, and I stepped onto the stage confident, composed, no trace of the broken girl they left behind. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed, investors leaned forward, scribbling notes, nodding with approval. And then I saw their faces. My mother's painted smile cracked, her lips twitching. My father's jaw clenched as if he had swallowed glass. Madison froze, eyes wide, clutching the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. They looked at me the way you'd look at a ghost, something they thought was gone, something that shouldn't exist, now standing tall in front of the world. I didn't spare them a single glance as I spoke, line by line, about the journey of my project. But inside, I felt the power of every insult they had hurled at me. Every leech, every waste of money, every laugh at my pain. It was all unraveling right there, in front of strangers who now saw me as valuable, talented, unstoppable. When the presentation ended, the applause rose again, louder this time. The CEO shook my hand, investors lined up to speak to me, and journalists scribbled furiously asking for interviews. My parents and Madison shrank in a corner, invisible for the first time in their lives. Later, as the crowd mingled, I approached them. They were pale, sweating, desperately trying to compose themselves. My father was the first to speak, his voice strained. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped." I laughed, sharp and cold. "Helped? You smashed my work, mocked me, abandoned me. You wanted me to crawl, you wanted me gone, so I left, and I built everything without you." Madison tried to sneer, but her voice cracked. "You're still nothing compared to me." I leaned in, close enough for only them to hear, and whispered, "You're right. I'm not compared to you. I'm above you." And then I walked away, leaving them standing there, shattered in silence, while the world they tried so hard to keep me out of embraced me completely. From that day forward, I cut all ties. I didn't answer their calls, didn't respond to their letters. When relatives asked why my parents looked so broken, why Madison's smile seemed forced, I just smiled politely and said, "Sometimes people erase themselves." And that was my revenge, not by dragging them into the dirt, not by bowing them down to their knees, but by proving that their cruelty had no power over me. They lived the rest of their lives haunted by the truth. The leech they laughed at was the one who thrived, while their golden child wilted under the weight of their lies. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.